Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the Deer Talk Now podcast. Today I'm going solo because this is a personal subject or subjects that I've studied professionally for 30 years. And, these two topics specifically for the past 20 and one of them more recently. How I want to back my way into this conversation is to anybody who knows me, I'm not much of a political person. I know a lot of people who are political people, and some of my friends are very vehemently vocal. Ted Nugent, one of them. I'm not, but I'm a journalist first and foremost. That's what I went to school for. And yes, I work in the hunting industry right now. I've done it my whole life. Well, not my whole life, but most of my whole life professionally. And what I've seen lately over the past 20 years, it's been a slow progression of things that have really made me saddened as a journalist and not so hopeful for the future of the news in our country. Two subjects I'm going to talk about today, COVID and chronic wasting disease. And both of these subjects in the deer hunting community have been subjected to enormous fake news over the past, especially the past 3 years. In chronic wasting diseases situation, the past 20 years. Now, I'm not saying that to be sensational. I'm saying that to be honest and truthful in that how I see this is how this is all unfolded. So I'm going to take COVID first, and then I'm going to take chronic wasting disease second. And I'm going to tell you why I think the news that we are being fed on a daily basis is mostly by agenda and also vendetta by groups that are doing it, and also on a professional side, laziness among journalists. So I'm going to get into that. I'm going to talk about COVID first. So if you're on any media today, whether it's network news, whether it's online, whether it's social media, you are bombarded, especially if you're a deer hunter or if you love whitetails. What has the news been lately? COVID and whitetails. And I'll call up a screen here on my laptop, and this isn't just me searching for it. I just type in COVID and deer in a Google search, and this is what comes up. You know, deer may have passed COVID to a person. COVID is rampant among deer, research shows. Some animal species that get COVID are deer in COVID's crosshairs. I mean, we're going to get to some really good ones as the farther we go down. Actually, I'm going to scroll over to my email because I saved some of these. These are what I call the fake news. This one's right out of NBC News. COVID is rampant among deer, research shows. Okay, that's one of them. Those are the headlines we're being fed. Here's another one. Are deer in COVID's crosshairs? And I'm going to give you just one more here. This one's from PBS, which I've had a big problem with lately. Scientists discover shockingly high COVID infection rates among deer. Okay, so let's talk about it first. From the deer and deer hunting perspective, this is an organization I followed my entire life. I've worked here professionally for 28 years. Deer are obviously America's number one game animal. Okay? COVID, let me back up there. The premise of our organization has always been comprehensive and practical information about white-tailed deer, mostly rooted in scientific research. That's been our forte. That's something that they built this organization on. When we look at those types of headlines, shockingly high rates, the first thing in my mind is I'm going to go and say, okay, where is this coming from? And look it up. I don't have to, we'll provide you the link. Came from the USDA. So the USDA did a study, 3 states, Pennsylvania, New York, and Michigan, whitetails. They studied, I think it was 343 deer. And they found them with, among those samples, high rates of COVID antibodies. Now, I'm not a scientist, but I can look up the research myself. That is different than deer being deer actually having the disease and walking around with it. Yes, if you have antibodies, chances are you might have had it, but that when humans we know more about that, in animals we don't. So that was the first question. Okay, number one, where's this coming from? And I would do this when I worked at the newspaper as trying to be an objective journalist. I went to school at one of the only nationally accredited journalism programs, and that's how I was taught as journalism is number one, find the source. Okay, the source is the USDA. Okay, that's probably a reputable source. Number two, what was the research? The research was a small sample from 3 states of deer that had COVID antibodies. Okay, so then the next question in my mind, not as a deer hunter, not as somebody working at deer and deer hunting, as a journalist, why did they study deer? Which really set off a red flag is when I went to that research, they studied deer because deer are a popular animal and they come in close contact with people. Huh? That was the second red flag. I'm like, what? Okay, so I'm going to extrapolate here you're saying that, I don't know. I haven't seen the whole premise of this research. And I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm sure it's 100% legit. It was scientific research. But why whitetails? Why were whitetails selected? And think about that. So I started doing some more journalistic research here. Well, what about dogs and cats? We actually know they get COVID and they pass it to people. We know that for a fact that people are getting sick from their pets. What about hamsters? That was one I found. 7 million people in the United States own hamsters. Hamsters are a known vector of COVID. There's 37 million research results when I type in deer and COVID. But when I type in, other things, they might come up, but it's not being put in my face on all the news. NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all these things. PBS is notorious for this. So now, as my 30 years in journalism, I'm backing it up. And I'm not saying this to be inflammatory, but today, because I work in media, I'll tell you today it's all about clicks, and that is not an understatement. Today it's shock and awe to get you to click on that headline. Now, if you click on some of these headlines, within some of those articles, they do explain that, it was COVID antibodies and the deer are not shedding this to humans, but it's shock and awe. Okay, so you probably know where I'm going with this. So the second thing with COVID is, like I said, all those other things. Well, why the big focus on deer? In the back of my mind, it all makes sense. And I'm sure it makes sense to you when you start putting the pieces of this puzzle together. Why has there been so much attention here? Because obviously deer are not coming in contact with people on a daily basis. You're not walking outside and walking up to a buck or a doe in your backyard or a fawn or anything for that matter. You are coming in contact with your dogs and your cats. So there's two things here. Number one, it's a portrayal of that quote-unquote news. The news is, we did a study, and yes, there are high antibodies there. That's news. It's 6th page. It's not headline news. And it's certainly not something you should be plastered, but we plastered all over it because people are going to click on it. Because, in my opinion, there's a couple things. You're going to get people to react to you in 3 ways in life, no matter what you do, no matter whether it's news or whether power, greed, or fear. And if you're in media and you can trigger any one of those 3, people will pay attention to you. And they're especially going to pay attention to fear, the fear of the unknown. And that's with COVID. Now, let's talk about chronic wasting disease for a second. That's actually not for a second, for quite a long time. Chronic wasting disease, okay, I don't need to explain what chronic wasting disease, I hope. But hang on, let me just scroll down here. There is actually some of my notes. Dogs and cats can be infected with it. I was actually a little bit off on my hamsters. There's 6.2 million. Chronic wasting disease, let's go to that Google search. What do you see in the news today with chronic wasting disease? This is what you see. Results for chronic wasting disease test. Second case of CWD confirmed in, name the state, Alabama. Right there is number 1. Chronic wasting disease confirmed in Colorado. Chronic wasting disease now in, name the state, Kentucky, Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Another county test positive for chronic wasting disease. Is that a news story today? Okay, some of my journalist friends will say, yes, it is a news story. It's brand new. Okay, sure. How long have we known about chronic wasting disease? We've known about it since 1967. How long have we known about it east of the Mississippi? 20 years, more than 20, 21 years. 21 years we've known about chronic wasting disease. It's really no longer a news story as far as, oh, yeah, we got it, because that's where all the focus is. Are you following me here? The focus now is, yep, it's over here now. Yep, it's over here now. Okay, great. Two questions, and I actually wrote them down here so I won't forget. I'm not dismissing chronic wasting disease. I don't dismiss that it exists. I don't dismiss that it is a threat to deer. But I need to put that all in perspective, because the two questions with anything, especially chronic wasting disease, are two questions you have to ask. Number one, will this decimate the deer herd? Actually, that's number two. Number one, will this affect people? Will that disease affect people? Zero shreds of any evidence that it affects people. Number two, will it decimate a deer herd? No, it won't. Has there been studies shown to say that deer herds have declined in some areas with chronic wasting disease? Yeah, in certain small pockets. Wyoming is one of them. Wyoming is a totally different world than Pennsylvania or New York or Wisconsin or Tennessee or Alabama or Georgia or Michigan or Illinois or Minnesota. The topography of that state and the dispersion of deer in that state is apples and oranges to anywhere else you're going to find. One thing that we found, okay, so let me go back to what we talked about, found chronic wasting disease east of the Mississippi for the first time in Wisconsin 21 years ago. Has it caused massive declines in deer? It hasn't shown any. Actually, in areas where it's been found, the deer populations are as high as they were. Granted, those populations are higher than they needed to be. When we talk about deer populations, we talk about healthy deer populations, 35 deer per square mile. That's the thing we always hang our hat on. That's optimal. Well, some of those areas still have 40, 50 deer per square mile or more. Is chronic wasting disease increasing in percentages where they test? Yes. But I'm going to get into that in a second. The biggest thing is the news. The news is what we see, and I talk about two things, shock and awe. I'm going to keep running this story out there as long as you guys keep clicking on it. And why do you keep clicking on it? Because it's going to cause fear in Alabama now because they found chronic wasting disease. It was somebody else's back door yesterday. We did not worry about it. It goes with anything in life. It's not my problem until it's in my backyard. Now it's in my backyard. Oh my God, now I'm going to worry. Who's worrying? Mostly the non-hunters. The non-hunters and the anti-hunters are the ones who are worrying about it. Because, and forgive my French, if you're a hunter, and I'm not saying you're a man, you could be a woman, you could identify as something else. If you're a hunter and your significant other finds out there's chronic wasting disease in your county, you're not bringing that shit in my house. I'm not eating it. Why? It could affect humans. That is the fear that has been the undertow of this whole discussion, especially for the past 20 years. The whole undertow is this fear of the unknown. Well, it could infect humans. Yeah, well, you know what? You can get toxoplasmosis from your cat. And 750 people in the United States died from it last year. Do you see headlines about that? Are you worried about that? Is your spouse saying, "Yeah, bringing that cat in this house? There's a chance I could die from it." No. You don't see those news stories. You don't see somebody saying, "You're not bringing those strawberries from Pick and Save," which I will never shop at again, by the way. Another story for another day. You're not bringing those strawberries in my house because they could have been treated with paraquat. What's that? It's a thing that they put on strawberries so they're nice and red and they grow and they're not nasty looking when you buy them from the store. Well, I didn't know that. No, because you're not researching it. Because you pick and choose the things you want to learn from your news. There are actual knowns out there. There are lots of risks in life. I risk drinking what I'm drinking out of this cup right now, but I'm not showing you the logo because there's all sorts of chemicals in it. Diet soda. You take risks in everything you do. But chronic wasting disease, now it's floated out there on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Ooh, we found it. I'm not saying it's not a bad disease. I'm saying that we have to put this all in perspective with what is the actual threat and what are we consuming as media consumers. We're being fed these stories. I call them fake news stories because there are journalists out there either A, on purpose, or B, by pure laziness. And I'm going to argue mostly for the latter because I worked in a newsroom for almost 5 years. No insult to any of you, but I worked with people who are like, you know what? I worked 40 hours this week. I get comp time after today, and I'm taking it off. Hey, that's great. But I'm not going the extra mile on this story. I'm not going the extra mile to tell you, oh, sure, we're going to go into these stories, and even in our hunting community, well, CWD is 100% fatal for deer. Okay. What are you doing about it? Well, we're waging a war to win. We're going to win this. What war? How are you going to eradicate a disease out of a wild cervid population? Number one. But let's even go past that and let's talk about the other diseases. The other diseases like chronic wasting disease. It's a neurological brain disease that eats away at the brain of a deer eventually and will kill it. Guess what? Almost every species has the same kind of disease. Sheep have it in scrapie. Cows have it with mad cow disease. It's bovine, blah, 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 encephalitis. Humans have it in Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease. Same types of diseases. They don't jump the species barrier. Mad cow did and killed 84 people out of 80 million in the UK, and everybody lost their minds because of the fear factor. I'm not saying it wasn't a disease we should be worried about. Now what happens? Well, Dan, they monitor for mad cow disease and they monitor for scrapie. Well, look up that research once, because I could spend the entire day talking about that with you, because we know actually there still are cases of scrapie in the United States. Now the sheep farmers associations will lose their mind and tell me to shut up. They have very specific protocol. They have to do certain types of tests. If a flock gets scrapie, they have to eradicate that flock. There's a whole set of things. Yes, it's a managed situation. Cattle, very, very small percentage are tested for mad cow. Is it out there? Probably not. We don't know. I'm going to say it's probably not based off of what I'm trying to find on mad cow disease. But with deer, it's spreading all over the place. But you know what? There's no link. Scrapie's been around for hundreds of years, and there's no links to it. Man. Hey, there's that sound again. We know what that all means. It means we're going to thank one of our sponsors. Today's episode of Deer Talk Now is brought to you by 10-Point and the all-new Nitro 505, the fastest crossbow in the world. With speeds of up to 505 feet per second and 227 foot-pounds of blistering power, the Nitro 505 is the fastest crossbow on the market and the most powerful crossbow ever built by 10-Point. I have not shot this crossbow yet. I am going to later this year, but my buddy Brad Fenson has. You might have already seen the videos on our YouTube page and other places on Deer and Deer Hunting. Brad is reporting that this crossbow has a perfect balance of reverse draw power in a platform that is unmatched in its ability to produce speed and power. The Nitro 505 is equipped with the newly designed RX-8 cam system, a two-stage zero-creep S1 trigger that delivers a consistent, crisp 3.5-pound pull, and the easy cocking and decocking systems that dealers recommend most, the AccuSlide. Check them out today at a 10-Point dealer near you, or go online for more information at 10pointcrossbows.com. One thing I will tell you, because we talk about basing what our reporting off of scientific information, there was a study in Wyoming that was a 50-year study of different, so with Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease in humans, CJD, that is a naturally occurring disease in humans. It infects, it's like 100 people a year die from it in the United States. I'd have to look that up. Don't quote me on that number, but it's very, very small. Of that disease, there's one that's called a variant. Basically, it shows up. So what they did is they did a 50-year study in the endemic area of Wyoming. So where they know that CWD, chronic wasting disease in deer, has existed for over 40 years. What they said is, okay, what we want to do is see how many people, they went through death certificates, all this stuff. They want to see how many people actually died of CJD in that area. And actually, the rate for CJD was higher in the rest of the United States than it was in that endemic area. So I had a lesser chance of dying of CJD if I lived in that area where they had chronic wasting disease for the past 40 years and I ate venison. And they actually did study people. They say, well, did they eat venison? The chances are, yes, this person probably did. But it was a very small number. What I'm saying is keep that all in perspective. I'm not sitting here. I am not a denier of any disease. I am 100% objective in looking at what are the facts and how is this being portrayed. So knowing all this, and I go on the web and I see these stories, I shake my head every single day, and I see it in our community. So then my community, my colleagues that I work with since 1994 in the hunting community, I hate to say industry, but the hunting community. Well, Dan, you're a little bit, knee-jerkish, and you're not basing it. What's your solution? What's my solution? What's your solution? Well, we're rolling up our sleeves and we're fighting this. How are you fighting it? Well, we're testing. Okay, well, how's that working out for you? Because you're taking the millions and millions of dollars that are being earmarked for chronic wasting disease, and it's just a bunch of nonsense. I'm not going to swear. It's a bunch of nonsense is what it is. Well, education is key. Okay, so educate me. With chronic wasting disease, don't move your whole carcass out of state if you want into Wyoming. Okay, fine. Bone that deer out, and don't eat the eyes, spleen, or cut into the spine. Okay, I won't. And best of all, disinfect those tools when you're done. Bleach your utensils and wear some gloves. Are you okay? That's fine. If we want to play that, great. Okay, education. We've did it. We've done it for 21 years now. We put out 2 magazines, CWD Update, our best-selling magazines. I was happy that our best-selling magazines. I was kind of guilty that it was pandering to that fear. But we want to educate people. Do all those things I just talked about. Take all those precautions. If the DNR tells you here's a bunch of doe tags film, make sure you keep your population. Okay, fine, checked all those marks. Is that winning a war? No, that's not winning a war. That's taking money and needlessly spending it on nice little. They have these you've seen them in places that have where you can take your deer carcass after you process it, and you can put it in this container. It's basically a pallet, but they got a nice little wrap with a picture of a deer on it, and it says chronic wasting disease sample site. You cut the deer's head off and put it in there. But there's millions of dollars, and then there's outreach and programs, and we're going to give seminars on this. I'm not picking on anybody in particular. I'm saying take all that money and give it to researchers and give it to guys in lab coats who are actually studying the disease and study the disease. Now, they said, what are the best ways to get rid of it in the wild? Well, James Kroll, I've disagreed with him on a lot of things over the years, but I do agree with him that in some areas they do what they call the spark containment. So if they find a case of CWD, they go in there and they try to manage that. And that's like a scorched earth thing. I personally don't think that's going to work. And the other thing, too, is, we could relate this to wolves, and I could add on another 45 minutes to this conversation, which I won't. But wolves are actually spreading CWD, eating deer, traveling 200 miles, pooping on the ground. Guess what? There's prions in that poop, and it's not going anywhere. But when I talk about when I made light of, sanitize your utensils, people, do you know any of the research on that? Because in Colorado, when they were studying this, they had research pens with deer with chronic wasting disease. They went into those pens. They killed all the deer. Killed them all. Okay? Burned the soil. Tilled the soil. Burned it again. And then applied some kind of bleach solution to everything. Let the pens sit empty. I don't know what the time. It was like years. Reintroduced healthy deer. Deer got CWD. So me wearing rubber gloves and using Dawn dish soap and some bleach on my knives, I'm gonna feel really confident about that. But the biggest thing is that's beside the point. For a disease we know doesn't infect humans. Are you following along with me here? We're getting that worked up about a disease. It's a game changer if we find it infects humans. The same thing with anything else. And the other thing with deer, going back to the earlier point, is this decimating our deer herds? No, it's not. Could it 50 years from now, 100 years? I don't know. Could we all die from eating those strawberries? Yes, we could. Just like anything else. And that's why I call this stuff fake news. I don't want to belabor that point, but I think it's something that is either being ignored or just glossed over in this whole conversation. One last thing I want to talk about. I don't know how long I went on here, but one last thing I want to talk about because I was saying this is about fake news. When we look at, this is a blog I wrote, deeranddeerhunting.com. That's the only plug I'm going to get you for. That's the ad for this episode. Deeranddeerhunting.com, my Dan Schmidt deer blog. Excuse me, I got to take a sip here. I got beat up for this one. I wrote a blog because I've been covering this for 21 years for CWD, working here for almost 28. And I said, where are all the photos of all this research? Because what really bothers me is when we take taxpayer dollars and we spend it on something. That's my money. That's your money. That's your money. It's all of our money. What are you spending it on? I don't know. Oh, well, we're doing outreach. We're doing information. Okay, great. Where are some more photos of deer with chronic wasting disease? Well, Dan, they talk down to me. Well, Dan, deer are dying out in the wild and they're getting eaten by eagles and coyotes and other things. And we just don't find them. Really? But you found this one. Okay, look at this. This is a simple Google search. Deer with chronic wasting disease. See this picture? That one right there? See this picture right there? See that picture right there? Those three pictures? 3 out of the first 5 photos that come up when I search deer with chronic wasting disease photos, I use those photos in my first article 21 years ago. And that's the best we got. This one down there, too. These are all, this one's not even chronic wasting disease. That's a deer with lipomas, melanomas. That's an elk. Some of these might actually have blue tongue. I don't know. They just get us this one right here, that doesn't have chronic wasting disease. There's all these, a lot of these deer were EHD victims, but most of the photos that you find are the same couple photos taken by the same researchers that I used in an article 21 years ago. And they say, well, that's not important. Isn't it not important? Wouldn't that be important for research? I don't care if the deer died in the pen. I don't care if they found it out in the wild. Surely, after all the millions of dollars that we're spending, somebody brought a deer in that tested positive for chronic wasting disease, and we can have a couple pictures of it that are floating out there. Is it a big cover-up? No, it's not a cover-up. It's just that, like I said, it's the laziness of the reporting. Who's not asking the same questions? Now, I'm going to go back to that other photo that I had here, because this is what gets me. When we talk about fake news, Milwaukee Journal, I grew up loving the Milwaukee Journal, Milwaukee Sentinel, especially for Brewers coverage, but they merged. And in all transparency, my first newspaper was owned by this company. Not that I have a vendetta, because I don't. But this is bad reporting. This is in my home state of Wisconsin. So I typed in, deer with chronic wasting disease. This is recent. 2 deer in Waukesha County, which is one county away from where I grew up, test positive for CWD. That's great. What's wrong with this right here? That's a mule deer. We don't have mule deer for, I don't know, we'd have to drive, David, like 1,200 miles to get to a mule deer? There's no mule deer in Wisconsin. That's lazy reporting right there. And that is from a major news organization. Well, we went to Getty or wherever, we went to the news service. You didn't ask somebody? You didn't go to the sports department and say, hey, does anybody deer hunt? Is this a whitetail? No. So that's the news you're consuming. I don't mean to pick on somebody. I'm not picking on that. Well, I'm picking on that photo editor, and I'm picking on the editor who didn't catch it. And now go scour my stuff and find mistakes. Yes, we're going to find mistakes. But this is what we're getting from a national level. National level. If you can't get the picture right, it's going to give me questions as to if you're getting the story right. And I know you're not. Because basically, this is a clickbait story. When I say that, I'm not saying it completely derogatory. Basically, it's like, oh, my God, they found it in Waukesha County? It's right next to Milwaukee. And you know what's going to happen there? Those poor guys that are hunters in Waukesha County who are traveling to northern Wisconsin to go deer hunting, You're not bringing this shit in my house. That could kill us. We could get some brain disease. Zombie deer. That's another headline that you're going to get. That's my biggest problem with this, how this stuff is portrayed. So the whole point of this discussion is not for me to rant and listen to myself talk. The point of this discussion is for you to be more critical when you're looking at the news, when you're reading the stories and asking the questions. And from a public citizen standpoint, is you should be demanding that any public money that is being spent on research should be spent on research to find out more about the disease. We don't need more information about it. Do we need more testing? We can have testing. That's certainly got to be part of it because we've got to know where it is. But we need better answers. And I don't have a solution on how to get chronic wasting disease out of a wild deer population. Also, I'm going to close. Excuse me. I told you I was going to close out on that. I'm not going to. I've got two more topics to address here. Two things. One is high fences, and one is measures that are being taken within the hunting community industry, if you have to call it that. First of all, high fences. People say, well, we should just shut down all high fences because, that's where the disease is coming from. No, that's not true. That is not true. They're why they're finding it in deer enclosures? Because the deer are in enclosures. That's where they're finding it. Those are the most regulated parts of our industry are high deer fences. Have I hunted one? No, I don't. But I'm not saying that if it's legal, that's fine. Do whatever you want. There's also research being done in high fence enclosures. High fence enclosures are not where CWD is spiraling out of control. That is not where the concern should be. The concern should be on the research of the disease, number one. Number two, one we've seen in our community is all sorts of bans, and the biggest one is on hunting scents, urine-based deer scents. And it kind of goes like this. While deer can shed prions through saliva and urine and nose-to-nose contact, and that's how the disease is spread, they shed these prions it's in the vegetation. It takes up from the ground into the plants, so they're eating it. And so the thinking there was, well, you know what? We're going to ban the use of deer-based urines. And it has happened in many states. We're going to go back to research on this. So the research done on this was done at Colorado State led by a team led by Dr. Davin Henderson. I talked to him a couple years ago. I think it was 3 years ago. We got the videos on our website. We actually have his whole presentation on our website from the archery trade show. No connection to the hunting industry. He's just a researcher. And the research there was chronic wasting disease. So here's the example, because basically he found how chronic wasting disease could be shed from urine and infected deer. Okay, so I'm going to use an analogy for you. Take a deer. Now, there is no known live test for chronic wasting disease, so you got to play along with me here. Let's say we have a deer that we know has chronic wasting disease. Okay, we're going to put that in a pen, and we're going to put some kind of collection apparatus to this deer, and we're going to collect its urine. Okay, deer with positive chronic wasting disease, we're going to collect its urine. We're going to collect 33,000 gallons of urine from this deer. Okay, how long is that going to take? I don't know how much a deer pees, but I think if it was me, it's going to take a while. Even though I pee a lot, it's going to take a lot to collect 33,000 gallons of urine. Right? We're in agreement on that. Good. So now we're going to have another pen, and we're going to put a deer that we know. Like I said, you have to play along here, that we know does not have chronic wasting disease. Okay? Deer with chronic wasting disease, deer without chronic wasting disease. 33,000 gallons of urine from this infected deer. Now we're going to take a syringe. We're going to inject that syringe into the brainstem of this, I'm not making this up, into this healthy deer, and we're going to take all 33,000 gallons of that urine and inject it into the brainstem of that healthy deer. And guess what's going to happen? When we're done injecting all that pee and hopefully not getting any on us, you're going to infect 1 gram of that deer's brain with chronic wasting disease. I am not making that up. That is the science. That is the science behind the transmission of urine. Dr. Henderson's conclusions were saliva and urine, yes, they do contain infectious prions, but it's among the lowest vectors. The highest vectors is in the blood. So that's what we know. That's what we know about that. So, but what really bothers me about these bans, again, patronizing people, well, Dan, this is something we can do as hunters to help. No. Well, you know what, Dan? Urines really don't even work. I've never killed a buck. That's how we're going to base decisions because you don't like something, because you've never killed a deer using a scent drag to your tree stand or your ground blind? That's besides the point. We're infecting an entire industry. I don't care if a scent company ever spent another penny on advertising. I'm going to put that out there right now. I'm not sponsored by that. That doesn't concern me. What concerns me is we're putting people out of work. That's a legitimate business, the hunting scent part of the hunting industry. Well, Dan, that's a dirty business. Okay, now you're the judge, jury, and executioner of who should have a business and who shouldn't in America. Well, if that's the case, let's open up the doors and let's look at drywallers and plumbers and teachers and everybody else. I don't like your business. It's a dirty business. It's something that we can do to prevent, something. That's the way I look at this. To me, it's preposterous. I don't understand it. I feel bad for the people who are in the industry, and I feel sorry for the people who hang their hat on this and think they're doing something for the good of the whitetail research, saying, well, we did something. We banned urine in Alabama because, it could, you could get disease from that. Okay, well, go ahead and ban paraquat and ban Roundup and ban other things that we actually know affect human health. Okay, I'm going to stop ranting. That's my rant for the day. Thanks for watching. Join us next time. Deer Talk Now. And make sure you subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or just tell your friends to download this from Podbeam or all the other places we have it. We'll catch you next time.